Everyone in the operations control center was staring at the red dot on the screen. A downed helicopter, a missing special forces team, and a rescue aircraft no longer visible on radar. 3 days later, a young woman with dried blood stains on her pilot uniform stepped out of a civilian plane that had approached the base. "I'm Captain Reed," she said in a tired voice. "I brought back the missing team." No one believed her. Women couldn't fly in that region. That's what they had been told. They couldn't participate in special operations. That's what had been taught. But when the hangar door opened, the 47 bullet holes in the tail of the damaged aircraft inside and the handwritten message on its wing forced everyone to face reality. Welcome to Best Honor Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching this extraordinary story of courage and forgotten heroism from. And if you believe stories like these deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us preserve them. Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, April 19, 2023, midnight. A tense silence prevailed in the Operations Control Center. Commander Colonel Richard Hayes couldn't take his eyes off the flashing red dot on the large screen. Standing beside him, Intelligence Officer Major Carter and Communications Officer Lieutenant Wilson wore the same concerned expressions. "When was the last contact?" asked Hayes, his voice lower than usual. 58 minutes ago, sir," said Wilson. "Their last message was under heavy fire. We've landed. Our position is east side of Chatak Valley, attempting to retrieve Special Forces personnel." Then communication was lost. Hayes took a deep breath. "They've disappeared from radar too, haven't they?" "Yes, sir. The signal transponder is not active. Either they're flying at low altitude or..." There was no need to complete the sentence. Everyone knew the possibility. The UC-27J Spartan rescue aircraft had likely been shot down. "What was the pilot's name?" "Captain Alexandra Reed, sir. From the 71st Special Operations Squadron." Hayes frowned. "Reed? A woman is flying that plane?" "Yes, sir," said Carter, glancing at the file. "This is her third tour in Afghanistan. She specializes in special rescue operations. Why haven't I heard of her before?" Hayes's voice was full of doubt. "She usually flies routine missions, sir. This was a special situation. The rescue team wasn't ready, but Reed was ready and volunteered." Hayes looked back at the screen. The red dot was still blinking in the same spot. Chatak Valley was a Taliban-controlled area near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. 2 days ago, an 8-person Special Forces team had become stranded after their helicopter was shot down. Reed's mission was to find them and bring them safely back to base. "Prepare the search and rescue team," said Hayes. "They'll leave at dawn." However, before the search and rescue mission could begin in the morning, an unexpected message arrived. An American checkpoint in Kabul reported that an unidentified aircraft had entered local airspace. The transponder was off. There was no communication, but the flight path was heading directly to Bagram. "Could it be an enemy aircraft?" Hayes asked during the emergency meeting. "I don't think so, sir," said Carter. "The radar signature matches a small transport aircraft. Probably civilian, maybe a local aid organization. We still can't take any risks. Prepare the F-16s and give the order for takeoff for identification." 2 fighter jets took off and were directed to meet the unidentified aircraft. Radio communication was attempted multiple times, but no response was received. "It's about to enter our airspace. What do we do, sir?" asked Wilson, listening to the pilot's voice through his headphones. Hayes thought for a moment. "Don't fire. Approach it and establish visual contact. Maybe their radios are malfunctioning." When the F-16s approached the target aircraft, a surprising report came in. "Command Center, this is Hawk 1. Target aircraft is a UC-27J, heavily damaged. Multiple bullet holes in the tail section. U.S. Air Force markings visible, but identification numbers unreadable." Hayes and everyone in the control room froze. Could this be Reed's missing aircraft? "Escort it," Hayes ordered. "Clear the runway and prepare for emergency landing." As the aircraft approached Bagram with the F-16s escorting it, a crackling voice was heard over the radio. "Bagram Tower, this is UC-27J, requesting emergency landing permission. Wounded on board." The voice belonged to a woman. UC-27J. This is Bagram Tower. Verify your identity, said the tower operator. Captain Alexandra Reed, 71st Squadron, from Chadak Valley. 8 passengers. Everyone in the operations control center looked at each other. Reed was alive and apparently had completed her mission. Landing permission granted, Reed. Runway 3 is ready. Emergency response teams are standing by. The aircraft noticeably wobbled during its landing. The landing gear hadn't fully deployed, and the plane skidded along the runway during landing, finally coming to a stop, leaving everyone holding their breath. Hayes, Carter, and a group of security personnel quickly ran to the runway. When the side door of the aircraft opened, the first thing they saw was a tired female pilot in a bloody uniform. Her hair was disheveled, her face covered with soot and dirt, but her eyes still held determination. "Captain Reed?" Hayes asked skeptically. "Yes, sir," said the woman, giving a military salute. "Mission complete. 8 Special Forces personnel rescued. They need medical assistance." Hayes looked into the aircraft behind Reed. Indeed, there were 8 soldiers, all looking exhausted and wounded, but alive. "How?" Hayes began, but Reed cut him off. "With your permission, sir, let's make sure they receive medical care first. I'll submit my report later." Hayes nodded and allowed the medical team to transport the wounded. Reed didn't leave the aircraft side until the last soldier was removed. Then she too was directed to medical evaluation. However, Reed's return created a wave of suspicion that quickly spread throughout the base. How could a female pilot carry out such a dangerous rescue operation in a Taliban-controlled area? Was Reed's story true, or was there something darker going on? The next morning, Hayes, Carter, and a committee of senior officers initiated a formal investigation. Reed was called to the base's meeting room. She still looked tired, but her uniform was clean, and her posture was straight. "Captain Reed," Hayes began, "tell us about your mission in Chatak Valley." Reed responded in a flat tone. "On April 19th, 2023, at 22:15, I took off in a UC-27J. My mission was to rescue the Special Forces team stranded in Chatak Valley. Their helicopter had been shot down 3 days earlier, and they were hiding in a dangerous area." "Why you?" interrupted Colonel Miller, the most senior officer on the committee. "Why send a single pilot instead of a specially trained rescue team?" "I understood that time was critical, sir," Reed said calmly. "Preparing the team would take at least 6 hours. Weather conditions were deteriorating, and intelligence reports showed increased Taliban movement in the area. Waiting meant risking those soldiers' lives. Still, sending a female pilot on such a mission, unusual," said Miller with obvious doubt in his tone. Reed's expression didn't change, but a spark flashed in her eyes. "I don't understand what my gender has to do with the mission, sir. I'm a qualified pilot and have been on similar operations before." Miller shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just asking, Captain, for procedural reasons. Procedure requires the fastest possible rescue of surviving personnel," said Reed. "I was ready and volunteered." Operations Commander Major Turner approved. Hayes intervened. "So, what happened when you reached the valley?" Reed took a deep breath. "As I approached the team's coordinates, I encountered heavy ground fire. I flew low, passing between the hills, and landed at a point close to the creek bed where the team was located. However, my aircraft was damaged, and my transponder and communication systems weren't working." "How could you make such a precise landing?" "There's no suitable terrain for landing in that area," said Carter. "I had flown in that region before, sir. There was a dry creek bed, narrow but sufficient for landing. I knew it was risky, but it was my only option." "And how did you find the 8 soldiers?" asked Hayes. "They found me, sir. They had seen my landing and moved toward my location. The entire team was there with various injuries, but able to move. And then, however, the plane was damaged, and I didn't have enough distance for takeoff. I emptied one of the fuel tanks, threw out everything unnecessary, and decided to take off with the lightest load possible." That's impossible, said Miller. Under those conditions, with that damaged aircraft, you couldn't have taken off. Reed simply said, I did, sir. What about the return journey? Asked Hayes. Why did it take 3 days? Taliban forces were scanning the area. We had to hide during the days. At night I flew at low altitude, under the radar. Fuel was limited, so we had to stop several times and secretly obtain fuel. Where did you find fuel? Asked Carter. From a local village, sir. Tractor fuel, not ideal, but it kept the aircraft running. Miller shook his head. This story is incredible, Captain. Do you have any proof? Reed silently stood up. I have proof, sir. My aircraft is still in the hangar. If you'll follow me, I can show you. The committee members looked at each other and then followed Reed. When they reached the base's main hangar, Reed opened the large metal door. Inside, the UC-27J stood motionless. In daylight, the damage the aircraft had sustained was even more evident. There were countless bullet holes along the tail section and fuselage. The right wing was shattered and the landing gear had been almost completely torn off. Counted 47 bullet holes, Reed said calmly. Most from small arms, but several from heavy machine guns. Hayes and the others walked around the aircraft in disbelief. It was almost impossible for an aircraft to still fly with this much damage. And look, said Reed, pointing to the right wing. On the wing there was a handwritten message. Without Reed, we wouldn't be. Face paint team. Captain Derek Moore wrote this. The leader of the Special Forces team, Reed explained. While we were en route to Bagram, the committee members silently read the message. Hayes turned to Reed, now with respect rather than doubt in his eyes. This is extraordinary, Captain, he said, but there's still something I don't understand. Why haven't I heard anything about this mission before? Why is there nothing in your file about previous missions like this? Reed hesitated for a moment, then said, Perhaps you should examine my file more carefully, sir. When they returned to the control room, Hayes immediately requested Reed's full service file. When Carter brought the file, everyone examined its contents with amazement. Alexandra Reed, 32, had graduated with honors from the Air Force Academy. For 4 years, she had served as a transport aircraft pilot. But 5 years ago, she had been selected for a special program, Operation Shadow Wing. Shadow Wing, Hayes murmured. What is this? A classified program, sir, said Miller, his face pale. Only a few people know about it. They train female pilots for special operations. Why female pilots? Asked Carter. Because in some regions, women arouse less suspicion, Miller explained, especially if the enemy has cultural prejudices against female warriors. No one thinks a female pilot could be dangerous. Hayes continued examining Reed's file. In the Shadow Wing program, Reed had completed 27 special operation missions in 5 years. 3 were direct rescue missions. 12 were intelligence gathering missions behind enemy lines. The rest involved transporting high-value targets. How do you feel about this woman? Asked Hayes. Moore looked at him with tears in his eyes. I owe her my life, sir. My team's lives. She's the bravest soldier I've ever known, and I'm ashamed that we doubted her just because she's a woman. Hayes nodded. We should all be ashamed, Captain, all of us. Reed was released from medical supervision the next day. As she walked through the base, she was met with a respect she had never seen before. Soldiers saluted, pilots bowed their heads respectfully. Her story had already become a legend throughout the base. As she passed by the hangar, she saw that the UC-27J had been completely dismantled. Technicians were counting the bullet holes and preparing damage reports. Exactly 47 holes, Captain, said the chief technician. It's a miracle this aircraft stayed airborne. Reed smiled slightly. It was a good aircraft. It won't fly again, said the technician sadly. But don't worry. The museum wants to display the aircraft as is. Under the name Reed's Miracle, Reed shook her head. No, the aircraft's name is Face Paint Team. I flew for them. The technician bowed his head respectfully. As you wish, Captain. That night, as Reed was returning to her tent, Hayes stopped her. Captain, could I speak with you privately? Reed nodded and invited Hayes into her tent. The interior was simple and orderly in typical military fashion. I want to ask you something, said Hayes, getting straight to the point. How many female pilots are in the Shadow Wing program? Reed hesitated for a moment. That information is classified, sir. I know, but I need to know. How many? 23, Reed finally said, all around the world serving at different bases. All appear to be ordinary pilots. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. And they all perform missions like yours? Yes, sir. Some gather intelligence, some perform rescue operations, and some transport special materials, and no one knows, said Hayes with admiration. That's the strength of this program, sir. Everyone ignores us. They think a woman can't perform a dangerous mission. Hayes gave Reed a long look. That thinking will change, Captain. Thanks to you. Reed shook her head. No, sir. The program must remain secret. Our effectiveness depends on it. But people should know, Hayes objected. They should know what women like you are capable of. Reed smiled. One day they will know, sir. But not now. Now we must continue to do our duty quietly. Hayes reluctantly agreed. All right, Captain. But one day, I'll make sure the world hears your story. Thank you, sir, said Reed. But it's not my story that matters. It's the story of the soldiers I rescued. They are the real heroes. As Hayes was leaving, he noticed a small photograph on Reed's desk. In the photo, a young girl was smiling next to a woman in a pilot's uniform. Your daughter? Hayes asked. Reed nodded. Yes, Sophie. She's 6. What does she think you do? She thinks I just fly transport planes, said Reed with a slight smile. One day I'll tell her the truth, that women can do anything. All they need is courage. Hayes nodded and saluted respectfully. Good night, Captain Reed, and on behalf of America, thank you. Reed returned the salute. Good night, Colonel. After Hayes left, Reed sat at her desk and opened her journal. It contained records of all her missions. On the last page, she wrote, April 19, 2023. Chatak Valley Operation. Rescued 8 soldiers. UC-27J took 47 bullet holes. Mission successful. Then she closed the journal and lay down on her bed. The next day, a new mission awaited her, and no one would ever know who this quiet young female pilot really was. 1 year later, Washington, D.C. Colonel Hayes sat in the Pentagon meeting room. Around the table were the highest-ranking commanders of the Air Force. We want an update on the Shadow Wing program, Colonel, said General Wilson, the most senior officer in the room. Hayes opened his file. The program is showing great success, sir. In the past year, our female pilots have conducted 57 special operations. The success rate is 98%. Incredible, said Wilson. And no one suspects? No, sir, even most base commanders don't know. The pilots appear to be performing just ordinary transport missions. What about Alexandra Reed? Asked another general. What happened after that incident? Hayes smiled. She's still on active duty, sir. In the last 6 months, she's conducted 4 critical operations. One was the evacuation of embassy personnel from the Iranian border. No one knows the mission was performed by a female pilot. Very good, said Wilson. This program has become one of our most valuable assets. After the meeting, as Hayes was walking down the corridor, he saw a female pilot coming toward him. It wasn't Reed, but she carried the same secret determination in her eyes. Colonel Hayes, said the woman, saluting, Captain Sarah Mitchell. I'm just coming from the Shadow Wing briefing. Hayes nodded. Captain Mitchell, how can I help you? You know Captain Reed, don't you? Yes, I do. I have a message for her, said Mitchell. She left for a mission this morning. One of our intelligence officers on the Pakistan border is in danger. Reed volunteered to evacuate the personnel. Hayes's face became serious. A dangerous mission. Yes, sir. But Reed said she could do it, and we believed her. Hayes smiled. Of course you believed her. She's Alexandra Reed. Mitchell nodded. Exactly, sir. She's our leader, our inspiration. We all want to be like her. Hayes saw the determination in Mitchell's eyes and knew that the Shadow Wing program was one of America's most powerful weapons. Because no one could predict what a woman was capable of, Captain Reed's story was never fully told in official records. Her missions, the lives she saved, remained in classified files. But at Bagram Air Base, pilots still tell the story of how one night, a lone female pilot accomplished the impossible by rescuing 8 soldiers, and of the 47 bullet holes in the tail of her aircraft. They say the aircraft is now displayed in a museum, but the pilot is still out there somewhere quietly continuing her duty, because real heroes perform their duties not for medals, but because they have to. And sometimes the greatest heroes are those whom no one sees as heroes. At Best Honor Stories, we will continue to tell the stories of forgotten heroes, women or men, young or old, recognized or nameless. We will not let their courage and sacrifices be forgotten. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share, and perhaps look around you with different eyes, because a real hero might be standing right next to you. See you in the next story, and until then, remember, true courage is often found in the most unexpected places.